The cold metal floor felt like ice against Jake Morrison's bare feet as he paced the small cell. 3 months had passed since the Vorthik captured him during the battle near Centauri Station. 3 months of tests, needles, and strange alien voices speaking in clicks and hisses outside his prison. The cell was small, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet, with walls made of some kind of clear material that looked like glass but felt much stronger. Jake had tried everything to break it. He had punched it until his knuckles bled. He had thrown his food tray at it. He had even tried to ram it with his shoulder. Nothing worked. The walls did not even show a scratch. Outside his cell, the alien research facility buzzed with activity. Jake could see creatures that looked like walking lizards moving back and forth through the corridors. They wore white coats like doctors back on Earth, but their skin was green and scaly. Their eyes were yellow and cold. The Vorthik, they called themselves. Jake was 28 years old and had been a Marine in the Earth Defense Corps for 6 years. He had fought in 3 different battles against alien raiders before the Vorthik caught him. He was not the kind of man who gave up easily. But this place tested even his strong will. The worst part was not knowing what they wanted from him. Every few days, the reptilian scientists would come to his cell. They would drag him to a white room filled with machines that beeped and hummed. They would stick needles in his arms and shine bright lights in his eyes. They would make him run on a machine like a hamster on a wheel while they watched. Numbers on their screens. Dr. Zexthara was the one who seemed to be in charge of studying him. She was taller than the other Vorthik, with darker green scales and 3 small horns on her head. She spoke some English, though her voice sounded like gravel in a blender when she tried to form human words. "Human Jake Morrison," she would say in her broken English, "you are most interesting specimen. Your species shows remarkable ability to survive. We must understand this trait." Jake never answered her questions. He had given them only his name, rank, and service number, just like his training taught him. Nothing more. This seemed to frustrate Dr. Zexthara, but it also seemed to make her more curious about him. The facility itself was huge. From what Jake could see through his cell walls, it stretched for hundreds of yards in every direction. There were dozens of other cells, most of them empty, but some held other prisoners. Jake had seen creatures he did not recognize, beings from worlds he had never heard of. All of them looked scared and tired, just like he felt, but the most terrifying thing in the entire facility was the creature they called NH-7. Jake first saw it on his 2nd day in captivity. He was being moved from his cell to one of the testing rooms when the corridor suddenly went silent. All the Vorthik scientists stopped what they were doing and pressed themselves against the walls. Their yellow eyes went wide with what looked like fear. Then Jake saw why. The thing that walked down the corridor was like nothing he had ever seen, even in his worst nightmares. It stood at least 9 feet, tall on 6 powerful legs. Its body was covered in what looked like black armor, but Jake could tell it was actually skin or shell. The creature had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could probably cut through steel. Its head was long and narrow, with rows of sharp teeth visible even when its mouth was closed. But the most unsettling thing about NH-7 was how it moved. Despite its size, it made no sound when it walked. It seemed to flow like water, smooth and deadly. Its skin changed color as it moved, shifting from black to match the walls around it. Sometimes Jake could barely see it at all. The Vorthek guards who were escorting Jake stepped aside quickly, their weapons lowered in respect. NH-7 looked at Jake with eyes that glowed like red coals in the dark. For a moment, those eyes studied him with an intelligence that made Jake's skin crawl. Then the creature moved on, disappearing around a corner like a shadow. What was that thing? Jake asked one of the guards, forgetting for a moment that he was not supposed to talk. The guard looked surprised that Jake had spoken. Nexus Hunter. It said in broken English, Guardian of Facility. It keeps prisoners contained. It keeps facility safe. Nothing escapes when NH7 watches. Back in his cell, Jake thought about what the guard had said. NH7 was some kind of security system, but it was alive. The way it had looked at him suggested it was smart, maybe as smart as a human. But it worked for the Vorthik. It was their weapon, their guard dog. Over the following weeks, Jake saw NH7 many times. The creature patrolled the facility on a schedule that Jake began to figure out. Every 6 hours, NH7 would walk through the prisoner sections. It would stop at each cell for exactly 30 seconds, studying whatever was inside. Its red eyes would scan everything, recording details that its alien mind would file away for later use. Jake noticed that the other prisoners were terrified of NH7. When the creature approached their cells, they would curl up in the farthest corner and shake with fear. Some of them would make small crying sounds. Others would try to hide under the thin blankets they were given. But Jake was different. He was scared, sure, but he was also curious. He was a Marine, trained to study his enemies and find their weaknesses. So when NH7 stopped at his cell during its patrols, Jake would stand at the clear wall and look right back at it. The first few times, NH7 seemed surprised by this. Most prisoners would not meet its gaze. But Jake would stand there, arms crossed, studying the creature just as much as it was studying him. After a few seconds, NH7 would move on to the next cell. But Jake got the feeling that the creature was thinking about him. Days turned into weeks. The tests continued. Dr. Zexthara became more frustrated with Jake's silence. The other prisoners came and went, some disappearing entirely. But Jake remained, and so did NH-7. Jake began to see something in the creature's red eyes during their staring contests. At first, he thought it might be hunger or the desire to kill. But the more he looked, the more he realized it was something else entirely. It was curiosity. NH7 was curious about the human who was not afraid of it. The testing room was cold and bright, filled with machines that Jake could not understand. He sat strapped to a metal chair while Dr. Zexthara attached wires to his head and arms. The reptilian scientist was trying a new test today, something about measuring his brain activity while she showed him pictures on a screen. Today we study human emotional responses, Dr. Zexthara said, her voice rough and hissing. You will look at images. Machines will record how your mind reacts. You cannot control this response, human Jake Morrison. Jake said nothing. He had learned that staying quiet made the tests go faster. The doctor would get frustrated and end the session sooner when he did not give her the reactions she wanted. The screen in front of him flickered to life. Images appeared one after another. Pictures of Earth cities burning, spaceships exploding, human soldiers dying in battle. Dr. Zexthara watched the machines carefully, taking notes on a tablet that glowed with alien symbols. Jake kept his face blank, even though some of the images made his heart race. He had trained himself not to show emotion during these tests. But the machines still detected the changes in his body. His pulse would speed up. His muscles would tense. Small reactions that he could not completely control. After an hour of this, an alarm began to sound somewhere in the facility. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside the testing room. Dr. Zexthara looked up from her notes with surprise. Emergency in Sector 7, a voice announced over the facility speakers in the Vorthik language. Jake had picked up enough of their words to understand basic announcements. Dr. Zexthara cursed in her own language and started disconnecting the wires from Jake's body. But before she could finish, another announcement came over the speakers. This one sounded more urgent. All senior staff report to Command Center immediately. Code Black situation in progress. The reptilian scientist paused, looking torn between continuing her work and following orders. The announcements kept coming, each one sounding more desperate than the last. Finally, Dr. Zexthara made her decision. "I must go," she said, gathering her tablets and notes. "Emergency protocols engage automatically. You remain secured until my return." She rushed out of the room, leaving Jake still strapped to the chair. The testing room door sealed shut behind her with a soft hiss. Jake was alone, or so he thought. The room was quiet except for the hum of machines and the distant sound of alarms. Jake tested the straps holding him to the chair, but they were too strong to break. He was stuck until someone came back for him. That was when he heard it. A soft sound like breathing, but deeper and slower than any human could make. Jake looked around the room but saw nothing. The sound came again, closer this time. Then the air in front of him seemed to shimmer and shift. The shimmer took shape, becoming solid and real. NH-7 materialized like a ghost becoming flesh. The creature had been in the room the whole time, invisible and watching. Jake's heart jumped, but he forced himself to stay calm. NH-7 stood perfectly still, its red eyes fixed on him. This was the first time they had been alone together, without barriers or guards nearby. Jake could smell the creature now, a strange scent like metal and ozone. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jake studied the creature's face, looking for signs of what it might be thinking. NH-7's expression was hard to read, but its eyes seemed different than before, less cold, more thoughtful. "So," Jake said finally, breaking the silence. "Rough day at work, huh?" NH-7's head tilted slightly to one side. The creature seemed surprised that Jake had spoken to it directly. Most prisoners screamed or begged when they saw NH-7. They did not make casual conversation. Jake tried to shrug, but the straps held him too tightly. "I know the feeling. Bad bosses, long hours, no vacation time. Story of my life." The creature took a step closer. Jake could see details now that he had never noticed before. NH-7's skin was not smooth-like he had thought. It was covered in tiny scales that shifted color constantly. The creature's forearms moved independently, each one seeming to have its own purpose. "You understand me, don't you?" Jake asked. "I can see it in your eyes. You're not just some dumb animal. You're thinking about what I'm saying." NH-7 moved, closer still, until it was only a few feet away. The creature's red eyes studied Jake's face with intense focus. It seemed to be trying to understand something that puzzled it. "Let me guess," Jake continued. "They told you I was dangerous, that humans are violent and unpredictable, that you need to watch me every second to keep me from escaping." The creature's eyes narrowed slightly. Jake thought he saw something that might have been agreement. "The truth is, I probably would try to escape if I got the chance. But right now, I'm stuck in this chair and you're stuck with guard duty. So we might as well talk." NH-7 circled around the chair slowly, studying Jake from different angles. Its movements were smooth and silent, like a predator stalking prey, but there was no aggression in its body language. It seemed curious more than threatening. A small maintenance drone wheeled into the room, through a service hatch near the floor. The little robot was damaged, sparking and moving in jerky motions. It beeped sadly as it tried to complete whatever task it had been programmed to do. Jake watched the drone struggle across the floor. One of its wheels was broken, making it move in circles. The robot kept trying to reach a control panel on the far wall, but it could not navigate around the equipment in its path. "Poor little guy," Jake said softly. "Somebody should help it." N7 followed Jake's gaze to the struggling drone. The creature watched as the robot bumped into table legs and fell over. When the maintenance drone managed to right itself and continue its hopeless journey, NH-7 seemed to be thinking about something. You know what the difference is between you and me? Jake asked the creature. You're programmed to follow orders. I choose what I want to do. Like right now, I want to help that little robot, but I can't because I'm tied up. If I were free, I would get up and carry it to where it needs to go. And NH-7 looked back at Jake with those glowing red eyes. Something was happening behind them, like gears turning in a complex machine. I bet you want to help it too, Jake said. You're smart enough to see that it's suffering. But your programming probably says it's not your job. You're supposed to guard prisoners, not fix broken robots. The creature stood perfectly still for almost a minute, watching the drone struggle. Then, moving very slowly, NH-7 walked over to the little robot. With surprising gentleness, the creature picked up the drone with one of its 4 hands and carried it to the control panel it had been trying to reach. The drone beeped happily and plugged itself into the panel to recharge. Its lights stopped flashing red and turned a steady blue. NH-7 looked back at Jake with what might have been confusion. The creature had just acted outside its programming, and it seemed to be trying to understand why. See? Jake said with a smile. You do understand. You chose to help because it was the right thing to do, not because someone ordered you to do it. The creature stared at Jake for a long time after that. When the alarms finally stopped and footsteps could be heard in the corridor outside, NH-7 activated its camouflage and disappeared again. But Jake knew the creature was still there, watching and thinking about their conversation. Something had changed between them. Something important. Over the next few weeks, NH-7 began spending more time near Jake's cell. The creature still followed its patrol schedule, but now it would linger at Jake's containment area longer than the standard 30 seconds. Sometimes it would stand there for several minutes, just watching and listening. Jake started talking to the creature during these visits. At first, he felt a little foolish talking to something that never responded. But he could see intelligence in those red eyes, and he sensed that NH-7 was learning from every word he said. You know, back on Earth, I had a dog named Rex, Jake said one evening as NH-7 stood outside his cell. He was a German shepherd, really smart. But the thing about Rex was that he chose to be loyal to me. Nobody programmed him or forced him. He just decided that I was his human, and he was going to protect me. NH-7 tilted its head slightly. A gesture Jake had learned meant the creature was thinking about something. The difference between Rex and you is that he was free to leave any time. He wanted, Jake continued, but he stayed because he wanted to. You stay because you have to. Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to make your own choices? The creature's red eyes seemed to glow brighter for a moment, but NH-7 said nothing and eventually moved on with its patrol. Dr. Zexthara had become more frustrated with Jake's continued silence during tests. She tried new methods to break his will, including showing him recordings of other human prisoners in different facilities. Jake's heart broke seeing his fellow humans suffering, but he kept his face blank and said nothing. Your species' loyalty is remarkable, Dr. Zexthara told him after one particularly difficult session. Even when shown evidence of their pain, you reveal nothing. This emotional strength will be useful for our research. Jake wanted to tell her exactly what he thought of her research, but he bit his tongue and stayed quiet. It was during one of these testing sessions that the facility experienced its first major emergency since Jake's arrival. Alarms began blaring throughout the complex, and this time they did not stop after a few minutes. Red emergency lights bathed everything in an eerie glow. Dr. Zexthara was in the middle of taking blood samples when the emergency began. She looked up from her work with concern as announcements in the Vorthek language echoed through the speakers. Containment breach in Sector 12. Jake heard one of the guards say to another in broken English. Multiple prisoners escaped. All security units respond immediately. Dr. Zexthara quickly finished her work and left Jake strapped to the medical table. Remain here, she ordered. Guards will return for you when the emergency is resolved. But the guards never came back. Hours passed. The alarms continued to sound. Jake could hear weapons firing in distant parts of the facility and the sound of running. Feet in the corridors. Whatever was happening, it was big. Eventually, Jake managed to work one of his hands free from the restraints. The Vorthik had been careless in their hurry to respond to the emergency. It took him another hour to free his other hand and his feet. Jake stood up slowly, his muscles cramped from being strapped down for so long. The door to the medical room was locked, but there was a ventilation grate near the ceiling that looked large enough for him to crawl through. Getting to the grate was not easy, but Jake managed to stack some equipment and climb up. He removed the grate cover and pulled himself into the narrow ventilation shaft. The space was tight, but he had crawled through worse during his military training. Jake followed the ventilation system toward what he hoped was the prisoner section. He wanted to find other captives and help them escape during the chaos. If he was going to die in this place, he at least wanted to save some innocent lives first. The ventilation shaft led him over several corridors filled with panicking Vorthik. He could see through the grates that many of the facility's normal lights had failed. Emergency power was barely keeping the essential systems running. When Jake reached the prisoner section, what he saw made his heart sink. Many of the cells were open and empty, but not because the prisoners had escaped. Bodies lay scattered in the corridors. The Vorthik had killed the prisoners rather than risk them escaping during the emergency, but some prisoners were still alive. Jake could see movement in a few cells. Aliens he did not recognize huddled in corners, terrified and waiting for death. Jake kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped down into the corridor. He ran to the first occupied cell and tried to figure out how to open it. The control panel was labeled in Vorthik symbols he could not read. That was when he heard footsteps behind him. Jake spun around, expecting to see Vorthik guards. Instead, he found himself face to face with NH-7. The creature stood perfectly still, its red eyes fixed on Jake. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jake knew he was caught. NH-7 could kill him easily, or call for guards to recapture him. I'm trying to help them, Jake said, pointing to the imprisoned aliens. These people did nothing wrong. They don't deserve to die, just because your bosses are having a bad day. NH-7 looked at the prisoners, then back at Jake. The creature seemed to be struggling with something internal, like two different programs fighting for control. You could help me, Jake said softly. You know how to open these cells. You could save them. The creature took a step forward. Jake thought it might attack him, but instead, NH-7 moved to the control panel. With one clawed finger, it entered a code. The cell door slid open. The alien prisoner inside looked terrified, but Jake gestured for it to come out. The creature was small and furry, like a cross between a rabbit and a bear. It chittered something in a language Jake did not understand, but its meaning was clear. It was grateful. NH-7 moved to the next cell and opened it as well. Then the next one. Within minutes, all the surviving prisoners were free and following Jake down the corridor, but their escape route was blocked by a group of Vorthik guards who had finally responded to the security breach. The guards raised their weapons and shouted, "Orders for everyone to freeze." Jake stepped in front of the freed prisoners, shielding them with his own body. He had no weapons and no armor. He was just one human against 6 armed reptilian soldiers. That was when NH-7 made its choice. The creature moved faster than Jake had ever seen anything move. It flowed like liquid death between the guards, its claws flashing in the emergency. Lighting. The Vorthic soldiers barely had time to scream before NH7 cut them down. When the brief battle was over, NH7 stood among the bodies of its former allies. The creature's black skin was splattered with green Vorthic blood, but it seemed. Uninjured, Jake stared at the creature in amazement. "You saved us," he said. "You turned against your own creators to protect innocent people." NH7 looked at Jake with those glowing red eyes. For the first time since they had met, the creature spoke. Its voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone, but the words were clear. "Choose ... Better," NH7 said slowly. "Choose ... to help." Jake smiled. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly right. You chose to help because it was the right thing to do." The creature had crossed a line it could never uncross. NH7 was no longer just a weapon or a guard. It had become something new. It had become free. The freed prisoners huddled together in a storage room, while Jake and NH7 figured out what to do next. The small furry alien that Jake had helped first seemed to understand some English. It told Jake its name was something that sounded like Pip, and that it had been captured from a peaceful trading ship. "We need to get you all to the shuttle bay," Jake told the group of 7 alien prisoners. "If we can steal a ship, we can get you home." NH7 stood guard at the door, listening for approaching footsteps. The creature had been quiet since killing the Vorthic guards, but Jake could tell it was thinking hard about what had happened. "Are you okay?" Jake asked the creature quietly. NH7 turned its red eyes toward Jake. "Feel ... strange," it said in its grinding voice. "Killed ... creators. Not supposed to ... Vorthic." "You saved innocent lives," Jake replied. "Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules." The creature's head tilted in that way Jake had come to recognize as confusion. "Rules. Important. Keep order. Keep ... safety." "Whose safety?" Jake asked. "The Vorthic who kill prisoners for fun? Or these people who never hurt anyone?" NH7 looked at the huddled prisoners, then back at Jake. The creature was struggling with ideas. It had never been programmed to handle right and wrong, justice and cruelty, choice and freedom. Before NH7 could answer, new alarms began sounding throughout the facility. These were different from the emergency alarms they had heard before. These sounded angry and urgent. "Security. Breach in prisoner section," a voice announced over the speakers in the Vorthic language. "Nexus Hunter NH7 has malfunctioned. All units respond with termination protocols." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "They're coming to kill you," he told NH-7. The creature showed no fear. "Expected," it said simply. "Betrayed programming. Must be ... terminated." "Like hell," Jake said firmly. "We're getting out of here together. All of us. But getting to the shuttle bay would not be easy." The facility was huge, and now every Vorthic soldier would be looking for them. Worse, they would be hunting NH7 with weapons designed specifically to kill. Nexus Hunters. NH-7 seemed to read Jake's thoughts. "No facility," the creature said. "No secret paths. Can reach shuttle bay." "What about the other Nexus Hunters?" Jake asked. "Won't they try to stop us?" NH-7's eyes glowed brighter. 3 others in facility. NH-3, NH-5, NH-9. They will ... follow orders. Try to kill me. Jake swallowed hard. One Nexus Hunter was terrifying enough. Fighting 3 of them seemed impossible. But NH-7 had advantages. The others did not. It knew the facility better than anyone, and it had something they lacked. It had chosen its own purpose. "We move now," NH-7 said. "Before they organize search." The creature led them through maintenance corridors and service tunnels that Jake had not known existed. NH-7 moved with perfect silence, scouting ahead and signaling when it was safe to follow. The freed prisoners stayed close together, trusting. Jake and their strange, new protector. They had made it halfway to the shuttle bay when they encountered the first Nexus hunter. NH-5 appeared in the corridor, ahead of them like a nightmare made real. It was smaller than NH-7, but looked just as deadly. Its red eyes locked onto the group immediately, and it let out a sound that was part roar and part electronic screech. Traitor detected, NH-5 said in a voice similar to NH-7's, but colder. Prisoners will be terminated. Malfunctioning unit will be destroyed. NH-7 stepped between NH-5 and the prisoners. Will not ... allow harm, it said. These people ... innocent. Innocent is not relevant, NH-5 replied. Orders are absolute. Compliance is required. The two creatures circled each other in the narrow corridor. Jake pushed the prisoners back, giving the Nexus hunters room to fight. He knew this battle would be vicious. NH-5 attacked first, its four arms moving in perfect coordination, but NH-7 was ready. The creature had learned things during its time with Jake that its programming had never taught it. It had learned to think creatively, to fight for something other than orders. The battle was fast and brutal. Both creatures moved with inhuman speed, their claws sparking against each other as they struck and parried. NH-5 was following its combat, programming exactly, using moves that had been tested and perfected in thousands of simulations. But NH-7 was doing something new. It was improvising, using the environment and its knowledge of the facility to gain advantages. When NH-5 backed it against a wall, NH-7 tore a pipe from the ceiling and used the escaping steam to blind its opponent. In the end, experience won over programming. NH-7 had fought in real battles, protecting the facility from genuine threats. NH-5 had only ever fought in simulations and against helpless prisoners. NH-7's claws found NH-5's throat, and the loyal creature fell silent forever. Hurts, NH-7 said quietly as it stood over its fallen opponent. Killing. Own kind hurts. Jake put a hand on the creature's arm. I'm sorry you had to do that, but you saved all of us. It continued toward the shuttle bay, but the facility was waking up around them. Vorthic soldiers were everywhere now, searching every room and corridor. Twice they had to hide in storage areas while armed patrols passed by. When they finally reached the shuttle bay, Jake's heart sank. The area was heavily guarded, with at least 20 Vorthic soldiers positioned around the ships. Getting past them would be nearly impossible, even with NH-7's help, but that was not their biggest problem. Standing in the center of the shuttle bay were the two remaining Nexus hunters, NH-3 and NH-9. They had been waiting. We know you would come here, NH-3 said as Jake and the others entered the bay. Only logical escape route. You are trapped. 9 stepped forward, its red eyes fixed on NH-7. Submit for termination. Do not make this more difficult than necessary. NH-7 looked at the prisoners huddled behind Jake, then at the two Nexus hunters blocking their escape. The creature was outnumbered and outgunned. Any rational being would surrender, but NH-7 was no longer entirely rational. It had learned something from Jake that its creators had never intended it to learn. It had learned to care about others more than itself. No, NH-7 said simply. We'll not submit. We'll protect. Friends. The word friends seemed to confuse the other Nexus hunters. It was not a concept they had been programmed to understand. Friends? NH-3 repeated. You are security unit. These are prisoners. Logic error detected. No error, NH-7 replied. Choice, learned from human. Learn to ... choose better. Jake stepped forward, standing beside the creature that had become his unlikely ally. "That's right," he said loudly enough for all the Vorthic soldiers to hear. NH7 chose to help innocent people instead of following orders to kill them. It chose to be better than what you made it to be. Some of the Vorthic soldiers looked uncertain. They had never seen a Nexus hunter disobey orders before. The idea that their perfect weapons might have free will was terrifying to them. But NH3 and NH9 showed no such doubt. They began moving forward, ready to destroy their former companion. "So be it," NH3 said. "Malfunction will be corrected." The final battle was about to begin, and Jake knew that even with NH7's help, their chances of survival were very small. But they had something the other Nexus hunters did not have. They had chosen to fight for something greater than themselves. The shuttle bay erupted into chaos as NH3 and NH9 attacked together. They moved like synchronized killing machines, their claws and fangs seeking to destroy the traitor who had dared to think for itself. NH-7 fought with desperate fury, but fighting two Nexus hunters at once was almost impossible. The creature dodged and weaved between its attackers, using every trick it had learned during its time guarding the facility. But for every blow NH7 landed, it received two in return. Jake watched helplessly as his friend was slowly overwhelmed. The Vorthic soldiers formed a circle around the fighting creatures, their weapons ready but not firing. They did not want to risk hitting their own Nexus hunters by mistake. "We have to help it," Jake told Pip, the small furry alien who had been staying close to him. "How?" Pip squeaked in broken English. "We have no weapons, no armor. We are just prisoners." Jake looked around the shuttle bay, searching for anything that might help. His eyes fell on the control station for the bay doors. If he could reach it, he might be able to cause enough confusion to give NH7 a chance. "Stay here and keep the others safe," Jake told Pip. Then he ran toward the control station. The Vorthic soldiers saw him moving and raised their weapons. Energy bolts sizzled through the air around Jake as he dodged between parked shuttles. One bolt hit the wall beside his head, leaving a smoking crater in the metal. Jake reached the control station and began pressing buttons randomly. He could not read the Vorthic symbols, but he hoped that something he did would help. Alarms began wailing as the shuttle bay's systems went haywire. Some of the lights went out, and the artificial gravity flickered on and off. The distraction worked. Some of the Vorthic soldiers turned their attention to Jake, giving NH7 the opening it needed. The creature managed to grab NH9 and slam it into a wall with enough force to crack the creature's armor like skin. But NH3 was still fresh and strong. It caught NH7 while the traitor was focused on NH9 and raked its claws across NH7's back. Dark fluid that might have been blood sprayed across the floor. NH-7 staggered but did not fall. The creature turned to face NH3, its red eyes burning with determination. "Why do you fight for them?" NH-3 asked, gesturing toward the cowering prisoners. "They are nothing, weak, useless. We are superior." "Wrong," NH-7 said, breathing heavily. "From its wounds, they choose to help each other, choose to be kind. We were made to kill. They choose to create." NH-3 seemed genuinely puzzled by this answer. "Choice is weakness. Orders give strength. You have become defective." "No," NH-7 replied. "Have become free." The word hit NH-3 like a physical blow. Freedom was a concept that no Nexus hunter was supposed to understand. It went against everything they had been programmed to believe. While NH-3 stood frozen by confusion, NH-7 struck. The creature's claws found the weak spot where NH-3's head joined its neck. NT-3 fell without another word, but the victory came at a terrible cost. NH-7 was badly wounded, with dark fluid leaking from dozens of cuts and tears in its armor-like skin. The creature swayed on its feet, fighting to stay conscious. NH-9 was getting back up, shaking its head to clear it from the impact with the wall. In a few seconds, it would be ready to fight again, and NH-7 was too badly hurt to defend itself. That was when Jake made his own choice. He jumped down from the control station and ran toward NH-9, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Hey, over here, you ugly piece of scrap metal." NH-9 turned toward Jake, its red eyes focusing on the human who had dared to insult it. The creature moved toward Jake with deadly intent. Its claws extended. Jake had no weapons and no armor. He was just a human facing a creature designed to kill beings much stronger than himself. But he was not afraid. He had learned something important from NH-7. Sometimes the right choice was also the brave choice. N9 reached Jake and raised its claws to strike. But before it could attack, NH-7 appeared behind it, moving faster than Jake had ever seen anything move. The wounded creature drove its claws through NH-9's back and out through its chest. N9 looked down at the claws protruding from its body with what might have been surprise. "Impossible," it said weakly. "You are too damaged to fight." "Not fighting for myself," NH-7 replied. "Fighting for friends makes me stronger." NH-9 collapsed and lay still. The shuttle bay fell silent except for the wailing of alarms and the heavy breathing of the surviving fighters. Jake ran to NH-7's side as the creature fell to its knees. The wounds were bad, worse than Jake had first thought. NH-7 was dying. "We need to get you medical help," Jake said, trying to support the massive creature. "No time," NH-7 said weakly. "Must escape." "Must warn your people?" "Warn them about what?" Jake asked. NH-7's red eyes flickered as the creature fought to stay conscious. "Found ... files while searching facility systems. Vorthik planned to invade Earth, using research on you, making weapons to kill humans." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. How many humans are they holding? Dozens. Different facilities. All across Vorthik space. Study human weaknesses. Plan to use knowledge for invasion. The Vorthik soldiers were regrouping now, raising their weapons toward Jake and NH-7. But before they could fire, NH-7 did something that shocked everyone in the shuttle bay. The creature began speaking in the Vorthik language, its voice carrying clearly across the large room. Jake could not understand the words, but he could hear the authority in NH-7's tone. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons wavering. NH-7 was still technically their superior, even if it had gone rogue. Years of conditioning made it difficult for them to ignore its commands. "What did you tell them?" Jake asked. "Told them. Facility will self-destruct in 10 minutes, NH-7 said with what might have been a smile. Told them to evacuate immediately." The Vorthik soldiers looked at each other uncertainly. Self-destruct protocols were serious business. If NH-7 was telling the truth and they stayed to fight, they would all die. One by one, the soldiers began running for the exits. Within minutes, the shuttle bay was empty, except for Jake, NH-7, and the freed prisoners. "Did you really set the facility to self-destruct?" Jake asked. NH-7's eyes dimmed slightly. "No, but gave us time. Must reach communication array. Must send warning to Earth." Jake helped NH-7 to its feet, though the creature could barely stand. "Which shuttle should we take?" "That one," NH-7 said, pointing to a sleek ship near the far wall. "Fastest in bay. Has long-range communications." Jake gathered the freed prisoners and helped them board the shuttle. NH-7 managed to walk to the pilot's seat, though every step seemed to cause the creature pain. "Can you fly this thing?" Jake asked. "Yes," NH-7 said simply. "But we'll need your help, losing ... strength." As the shuttle lifted off from the facility, Jake looked back at the place where he had been imprisoned for so long. Soon it would be far behind them, but the knowledge NH-7 had discovered would travel with them. Earth was in danger, and Jake was the only human who knew about it. But he was not alone. He had a friend who had chosen to help him, even though it meant betraying everything the creature had been created to be. The stolen shuttle flew through space toward the outer edge of the Vortex system. Jake sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching NH-7 struggle to keep the ship on course. The creature's wounds were getting worse, and its movements were becoming slower and less precise. "How much farther to the communication array?" Jake asked. 2 hours, NH-7 replied, its voice weaker than before. "Maybe less. Depends on Vortex patrols." Behind them, the freed prisoners huddled together in the passenger section. Pip had taken charge of the group, making sure everyone was secure and trying to calm their fears. The small alien had shown remarkable courage throughout their escape. "Tell me about the invasion plans," Jake said. "Everything you found in their files." NH-7's red eyes flickered as the creature accessed its memory. "Vorthic Empire believes humans are dangerous. Your species spreads too fast, adapts too well. They fear you will become threat to their expansion. So they want to wipe us out first," Jake said grimly. "Yes, but also want to study you. Learn what makes humans so adaptable. Plan to use that knowledge to improve their own soldiers." Jake felt sick thinking about what the Vortex scientists had been doing to human prisoners. "How many facilities are there?" 17, each holding between 5 and 20 humans. All across Vortex space. Data from all facilities goes to Central Command. "And the invasion?" NH-7 was quiet for a moment, concentrating on flying the ship around a small asteroid. "Fleet already assembled. 1,000 ships. Waiting for final research results. When scientists finish studying human weaknesses, invasion begins." Jake did the math in his head. Earth's defenses were strong, but they were not designed to fight off 1,000 enemy ships. The planet would fall within days unless they had advance warning. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Not sure." "Maybe weeks. Maybe days. Depends on how fast they complete research." An alarm chimed softly on the ship's control panel. NH-7 looked at the display and growled deep in its throat. "Patrol ships," the creature said. 3 of them, coming fast. Jake looked at the scanner display. 3 red dots were moving toward them at high speed. "Can we outrun them?" "This ship faster. But they know where we are going. They'll try to cut us off." NH-7 increased their speed, but Jake could see that the creature was struggling. The wounded Nexus Hunter was using all its remaining strength just to keep them flying straight. "Let me help," Jake said, reaching for the controls. "No, too complicated. Human reflexes not fast enough for this ship." But even as NH-7 spoke, the creature's hands began to shake. Dark fluid was leaking from its wounds faster now, cooling on the floor around the pilot's seat. The patrol ships were getting closer. In a few minutes, they would be in weapons range. "Can this ship fight?" Jake asked. "Has weapons, but 3 against 1. Bad odds." Jake looked back at the passengers. They were all depending on him and NH-7 to get them to safety. But more than that, the fate of Earth might depend on the message they needed to send. "What if you don't make it?" Jake asked quietly. "Can you teach me to send the message?" NH-7 turned its red eyes toward Jake. The light in them was dimmer now, but still bright enough to show the creature's determination. "Yes, we'll teach you, but must reach Array first." The next hour was the longest of Jake's life. NH-7 flew with skill that bordered on impossible, dodging between asteroids and using every trick the creature knew to stay ahead of their pursuers. But the patrol ships were gaining ground, and NH-7 was getting weaker by the minute. When they finally reached the communication array, it looked like a massive metal flower floating in space. Dozens of antenna dishes pointed in different directions, ready to send messages across the galaxy. "How do we get aboard?" Jake asked. "Docking port on lower section," NH-7 said. "But patrol ships will arrive in 15 minutes. Not much time." NH-7 managed to dock the shuttle, but the creature collapsed as soon as the ship was secure. Jake knelt beside his friend, trying to help, but there was nothing he could do. NH-7 was dying. "Go," the creature whispered. "Must send message. Earth needs warning." "Come with me," Jake said. "We can do this together." "No, too weak. You must go alone. Remember what I taught you. Find main communication console. Enter Earth's defense frequency. Send everything." Jake hesitated. He did not want to leave NH-7 alone. "Go," the creature said with the last of its strength. Time running out. Jake ran through the docking tube and into the communication array. The station was automated, with no crew aboard. He found the main console and began entering the commands NH-7 had taught him. The process was complicated, but Jake's military training helped him stay calm under pressure. He entered Earth's defense frequency and began uploading all the data NH-7 had stolen from the Vorthic facility. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of the patrol ships arriving. Weapons fire lit up the space around the communication array. They were trying to destroy the station before the message could be sent. The upload was at 60% when the station shook from a direct hit. 70%. The lights flickered, and some of the consoles went dark. 80%. Jake could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. The Vorthic soldiers had boarded the station. 90%. The door burst open just as the upload reached 100%. Jake smiled as he pressed the final button to send the message. "Message sent," he said to the Vorthic soldiers who pointed their weapons at him. "Earth knows you're coming." Back on the shuttle, NH-7 lay motionless in the pilot's seat. The creature's red eyes had finally gone dark, but there was something that might have been peace on its alien face. Jake was captured again, but this time it did not matter. The message had reached Earth. The planet's defenses were mobilizing. The invasion fleet would find humanity ready and waiting. 3 months later, when the Vorthic fleet arrived at Earth, they found a trap instead of an easy conquest. Earth ships were positioned perfectly, and the planet's defenses had been upgraded with new weapons designed specifically to fight Vorthic technology. The battle was fierce, but Earth won. The Vorthic Empire's expansion was stopped, and their invasion fleet was destroyed. After the victory, Jake was rescued during a prisoner exchange. He returned to Earth as a hero, but he always insisted that the real hero was NH-7. A memorial was built in the creature's honor in the center of Earth's capital city. The inscription reads simple words that NH-7 would have understood. To NH-7, who chose freedom over programming and friendship over orders. The first non-human to receive Earth's Medal of Honor. A guardian who became a friend. Jake visited the memorial every year on the anniversary of their escape. He would stand there for hours, remembering the creature who had learned to make its own choices. NH-7 had been created to be a weapon, but it had chosen to become something better. It had chosen to be free. And in choosing freedom, it had saved them all.